Hey gang, week 5, time is flying. Today, we are going to be looking at, or kind of picking up where we left off in week 4. We kind of left off, we were doing an image texture, or working with image textures and materials. And we were just about to start talking about UV, and we ran out of time. So today we're going to start with covering UV and what it even is. Then we'll get into sculpting. So we'll kind of change gears and talk about sculpting and what that is, how it works, which will lead into talking about assignment 3, which you can begin working on this week if you've finished assignment 2. So without further ado, let's just jump right in. Let's start talking about UV. So imagine, if you will, a cereal box or any kind of box, food packaging box, or any box of anything for that matter. But with the cereal box, things are printed on all sides. Now, I guess maybe some printers are capable of actually printing on a box as it's actually a box, but normally how it works when you print graphics on cereal boxes is it's laid out as a flat piece of cardboard, and then they fold it up into a box. So UV editing in a 3D workspace is the same principle, that we're taking something that's flat and turning it into covering something that's 3D. So with me here, join along with me in Blender. I just started a brand new default project here. We can delete our camera and we can delete our light. And up along the very top here, we've got our different workspaces. Maybe you've played with these a little bit. Layout, modeling. Modeling actually might be a little bit more handy for what we've been doing, since it removes the timeline on the bottom here. Sculpting we'll talk about today, actually. But first, let's go to UV editing. So we have 2 windows here, 2 viewports. On the right is more of our traditional one, and on the left is our UV viewport here. Let me start my keyboard shortcuts here. So select the box, and we're in object mode presently. If you hit tab and go into edit mode, you can see that over here on the left now we have this T shape, which is this cube folded out and flattened. So this is a flattened out version of this. Up here in the top left of your UV window here, there's these 2 arrows. This says UV sync selection when I hover my mouse over it. If you click this will allow you to show you, when you select something on one side, it'll select it on the other side. So let's go 3 for face select. And if I click on the left side here and select this cube, this is the cube that is then selected on this side. So if you can do the same thing the other way too. This cube is here. Cool. So what good does this do us? This allows us to control how an image texture or any material or texture is shown on these flat surfaces. Let's put a new image texture onto our cube here. So we could go and find one, but we can actually just kind of create one here in Blender. And then I can show you how you can actually do texture painting. So you can actually use your mouse to draw textures on here. So we are here in our UV editing layout. Here in the top, we can, on your UV editing side over here, top left, we can actually hit this new button and say create new image. So this is creating a new image to be our UV image. So we can hit new here. 1024, so you could create a size. Squares is best, absolutely. 1024 by 1024 is fine, and we can just call this paint, texture, image, something, whatever. Okay, perfect. So now you can see that it's put a, and I should say one other thing if I undo. The default color is black, so you can change this to a different color. Actually, maybe right now I'll make this blue just for fun. So I'll call this like blue texture, and it's 1024 by 1024. Okay. So it's made this blue. So now over here on the right, we can go to our material preview mode. So you can hit the Z key and then hit material preview, or just remember it's up here in the top right. It's right now it's hidden for me because my screen can't hold all these things, but it's this one right here. We've created this blue texture here. We're looking at it, we're seeing it on top of here, but we still need to apply it to the material that's on this object. So it's a little bit complicated, but let's go through it. So just a reminder, remember from last week, I've got my cube selected here. We're going down to this little beach ball, this red beach ball here, material properties. There is this default material on here, but it's just set to the same base color. So because even though we switched to material preview, it's still showing it as this white, and we need to change it to this image texture that we created. So we can just click right next to here where it says base color. There's this little yellow dot. Don't click on the color, click on the dot. And we want to change this to, go over underneath textures. We want image texture. And previously, what we did is we opened. You can actually create a new one here too. But here on the left, there's this little icon with a drop down. We can choose the one that we created on the left. So blue texture here is in the list. So I'm clicking on this little icon here and hit blue texture. And now you can see that we have achieved blue image texture on here. Okay, where do we go from here? So I want to show you something a little new here, and that is texture paint. So previously we've just been in edit mode, but if you actually click this drop down, we can go to texture paint. And what this will allow you to do is to actually draw right here on your textures. So you can see like when we draw on one side, it shows up on the other side. So actually let me undo that and let me just make numbers. So keyboard shortcut to make your brush bigger is F. So if you tap F once, you can drag your mouse and make it bigger or smaller. And then tap or click your left mouse wheel or mouse button to select that size. So I'm just going to put some numbers on here. So we'll say this one is 1, this one is 2, this one is 3, this one is 4. You can see your orientation gets off a little bit. 5, and then this one is 6. Okay, so let's go back to edit mode. So we can see that we have our different faces here, each on one side. So one thing to note here, so like look at so 1 and 6 are not connected here, but like if I go back to my texture paint and I kind of color over this line like this, you can see that it jumps from here to there, that there's actually like a seam here on our flat UV layout thing. So I can get tabbed back into edit mode, so you can see that like when I color here, it jumps over to that side. Now, the other thing about UV editing is we can change the scale of things over here to make things appear, to make your texture appear larger and smaller. So like let's take this 6 for example. So over here on the left, I have this face selected. I can S to scale, and you can see that it makes, as I scale that face on the UV bigger, it makes it appear smaller on the real deal. So the same goes in reverse too. I can scale down this way and make it gigantic. So there actually is another layout workspace that we can do right next to UV editing, and that is texture paint. And so over here you can actually paint on this side as well. So like if I want something to go between, let's see, which ones are connected? 4 and 6 like this. If I actually wanted something to go between them, I could, paint like this over the corner like that. So we're here in the texture paint window. So like I could, let's see, I could type, like, do my name here, Nolan. But I drew it off of where any of these like cubes are. But what I could do is I could go back to my UV editing layout, grab this face, G, and just like slide it. Oops, and I suppose I should be looking at 4 here while I'm doing this. I could go G, grab it, and move it over my name. and so now that paint is appearing, or that, it's appearing on the face here. Now how this is set up is actually a little bit sloppy because typically when we're UV editing, you want all of your faces to be connected. But we'll look at how that works in just a second. So let's start over with this here. So let me go back to modeling here. I'm going to go tab to get into object mode, and I'm going to delete this. And I want to create a new cube. So what I want to do is I want to create like a wood block, and I want it to have like a pretty uniform wooden texture. And I want to bevel the edges so it's just like a little bit rounder, a little bit nicer. So follow along with me here. So Shift A, I want to add a mesh, I want to add a cube. I'm going to go tab to edit mode. I want to select all of my edges. So I'm going to go 2 on my number pad to get to edge select. And I have them all selected right now. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to do Control B for bevel. And I just want to do a little bit of a bevel. I'm going to move this out, middle mouse wheel up a couple times like this, maybe 3 times, and click here like this. So I have like a kind of nice, like this, imagine like a toy wooden block that a kid would play with. Perfect. And let's go tab into object mode, and I'm going to right click here and give it a shade smooth. So it looks like it's just like a nice rounded little cube here. So next, let's add a wooden texture. So last week I found a wooden texture that I'm going to just use again. Let me see if I can find it. Wood texture. Yeah, here it is. You can just go on Google and find one that you might want to use too. Just make sure it's a square, make sure it's enough pixels. You can just do a Google image search. Look back at last week if you want to remember how to do that. So I've got my cube. I'm in my material properties tab here. I'm going to hit I'm just going to hit new like this. And I'm going to double click on material 001 and we're going to call this wood texture. It's important to label things so that you can identify them later. Instead of just a regular base color, so it's a principled BSDF, we can leave that as it is. I'm going to change the base color to a image texture here by clicking on this little yellow dot, image texture. Rather than opening that blue one or creating a new one, I'm just going to open the file. I have it saved in spring 2022, and it is woodtexture.jpg, open image. Can't see it right away because I'm still in solid mode. So I can either click here to go into material preview, or shortcut is Z key and go to material preview. Okay. Now, my wood texture is on here. So looking at our cube here now, there's a couple of issues. We can see that there's a couple places where there's definite seams where we maybe wouldn't want them to be. Now, you may say, well, Nolan, just spin it the other way and there's no seams over here. But let's say that I wanted to have the material like continue over the top rather than wrap around the sides. So we want to be able to control how this image is wrapped around this object. So let's go to our UV editing workspace here. We can just switch to we still have our blue texture opened. Let's open our wood texture like this. And let's tab to get into our edit mode, and we can see how this is laid out here. So, you can move things around a little bit. You can see the effect it has. So if I grab this vertex here, you can see that. So keep in mind, I still have this UV sync selection active here. So I can like G move this, and you can see how moving this kind of changes the shape of stuff on the right side. But I want to signal exactly where I want seams to appear. So I'm going to undo that. And that's by unwrapping. So there's a process in 3D that's called UV unwrapping. And real quick side note. UV is a lot of people's least favorite part of 3D. It's not very glamorous. It's a little bit tedious. But if you're going to be using image textures for anything, like this is a huge consideration in game design and other things like that. Loading assets and like being efficient and doing it properly is a very important part of some aspects of 3D, but that doesn't mean it's fun. So you got to understand how it is, and maybe some of you will just be like, I don't want to have to deal with this anymore. Other side note, why is it called UV? I believe it's because in 3D space we have 3 axes, and I just realized I was looking at this upside down. The X, the Y, and the Z, sideways, frontwards, upwards. U, V, and W, those 3 letters are reserved for the other axes, like the other dimensions. So like this is the U dimension, this is the V dimension, and then I believe, I'm getting into my theoretical physics a little bit, but the W dimension would be like over time. So UV editing, like this is, rather than X and Y, it's U and V. Anyway, tangent, sorry. So this that we're seeing here on the left, this is just how Blender kind of default created they call this the UV map of this object. Now, I should also say that if we go back to layout mode, when you add in some things, like if I add another cube here, like this, and I open up my cube menu, there's this button that says generate UVs that's ticked. And so it's automatically creating a UV for the cube. Now, not every primitive has that, I believe. So like if I go to Torus, oh no, it does have generate UVs. Shift A, UV sphere, yeah, okay. So I guess all the primitives can automatically generate the UVs when you do it, but oftentimes if you're doing anything besides just an actual cube or an actual donut, you're going to want to unwrap your object. Oops, I deleted the cube instead of the sphere. Okay. UV editing. So let's look at this. Tab to get into edit mode. So think about where your camera is going to be. So I'm going to add a camera back in my scene here. Camera, add a camera. I want it to be like right here. I don't know. I'm being picky. Control Shift 0 right here. Back it up a little bit. All right, so I've got my camera here. So the problem that I want to try to solve is I want to have the wood texture kind of fall around this side and not have a seam right here. Now I know this isn't a perfect example, but it's a very simple example. So I'm gonna get out of my camera view here. I actually just want to hide my camera like that so it's not in my face. Out of my face. Let's tab to get into edit mode. Now, what I want to do is I want to choose seams for my object. So I want to choose where the texture can be like separate and cut out. So a great place So, and the idea is you kind of want to hide your seams. Now it's going to be very hard to hide all of your seams, but you want to be able to hide as many as you can. So a great place to start with creating seams is something that's not going to be seen by the camera. So like right now, what I can do, so if I know my camera is going to be here, what I can do is I can go down to the bottom here and say like, okay, well, I'm selecting edges here. So I'm in 2 for edge select. Why don't I loop cut around like this? And did it do it? No, it went the other way. I guess I can't quite loop cut. So I'm just going to hold down my shift key and select these ones here. I'm going around the bottom, just selecting. Oh, I'm sorry if it's under my camera. Just kind of going in a loop here like this. And shift clicking, holding. I want to select this whole loop finally around the bottom. Cool. And now what I can do to say, hey, when you unwrap this, I want this to be a seam. I can right click and say mark seam right here. About halfway down when you right click and you've got that edge selected, mark seam. And what it does is it turns it red. And so when we unwrap this in a second, it's going to say, okay, this is one chunk. So let's, where's my camera again? I'm going to turn my camera. Okay. So another natural place to unwrap is probably going to be like the back, the other parts that we can't see. So what I'll do is I'll probably just go back here and I'll say like, okay, let me start selecting this part. I want this to be a seam in my texture because again, this doesn't really matter because the camera's not even going to see it. So I'm even going to select both of these sides back here. Click, 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 click. Whoops, not that one. Control click will unselect. If I hold down shift, there we go. Going around down the line there like that. So I've selected a line along this edge, here, down to here. And I'm going to do the same thing. Right click and say mark seam. And it creates a red line along there. So we've got, and so you have to like plan a little bit. Think about, imagine if you were going to cut this out and fold it into a cereal box or, you know, lay it flat. What would be the most efficient way? So let's just, and I know that this again is not optimal, but I just want to show you what it looks like now when we unwrap this. So now to unwrap this, we want to select everything. So actually the keyboard shortcut to select everything rather than like trying to go all the way around and hold down the shift key, you can just hit the A key, and it'll select all, A for all. And we want to unwrap this. So 2 ways to do it. You can either go up to the UV menu here and hit unwrap, or obviously you hopefully saw that the keyboard shortcut is U, and we can hit unwrap. Okay, so let's see what this has done. So it's given us our different areas, and it's laid them out here, and it's not bad. So let's see, where's our camera? Let me go 0 to get into my camera view. Whoops, I think my mouse has to be here. Let's go back into object mode. Aha, so it actually like looks okay. We can see that the wood material kind of continues around all of these corners. I was expecting it to not look great because it's kind of being stretched a little bit. So actually, you know, if I go back into edit mode, you can see that the squares are now no longer square here. But the effect is actually just fine. So the other kind of cool thing, so because we have we kind of cut out different sections. So looking back at our cube here, this is kind of one complete section here. These 2 sides are one complete section, and then these 3 sides are a complete section. On the UV map over here, those are called islands. So you kind of can't tell because it kind of put them right next to each other. But like these, you know, these are the 3 sides facing the camera. Let's see, this one I believe is the one on the bottom. Yep, and then these 2 are the ones on the back. If you want to select an entire island, that's the term, over here in the UV editor over here, you can hit the L key with your mouse over it. So I'm putting my mouse anywhere over these three faces, and I hit L, and it's going to select that entire island, and then you can do with it what you please. Let's get back to our camera view here. And so with this island selected, I hit with the L key. So again, I hover my mouse over this island, hit L. We can scale this down, or sorry, scale this, oops, S, scale it down if we want. So we can see that as I scale it down, you know, it gets larger, or I could scale it up like this, the texture gets smaller. Whoa, my mouse jumped a little bit. So we can edit this island a little bit. Same thing over here. If I hover over here, L, I can G, move this island. Oops, and I had that other one also selected, so I can L like this. G, move that over here. Well, I can't really see it doing anything, but this is the one on the bottom. G, move it over here if I want a different part of the pattern. I can S scale it to make it larger or smaller. What else? You know, same thing over here. I can L, S. That's on the back side. Now, the other thing that I'm doing that is a no-no is it's going off the edge here. You can see like right here it's going off the edge, right here it's going off the edge. So let's see if I can see it here. That would be this one. Where's this face? Where's this one? So yeah, okay, right here. So where it's going off the edge, you can see right here, it's going off the edge. We can see that there is a seam in my model. So this is not a repeating pattern. So what it's doing is it's using the image texture all the way up to here, all the way up to the edge, and then it goes back to the top. So really like this here, what we're looking at, this little bit that's off the map is just pulling it from the other side. So it kind of repeats left to right and top to bottom. So a lot of times you can find image textures that repeat. They're called seamless, so that like no matter where you are on an edge, it'll kind of loop back on itself. So that's something you can try to look for or try to create. But it's usually a good idea just to, I'm going to select this island, S, keep everything on your UV map, on your one image texture. So actually I'm pretty pleased with how this turned out, even though it's like a little bit stretched. You can't really tell because wood is, you know, it's natural. It kind of is a little wild and moves around a little bit. So yeah, to someone who's really studying it, you can tell that it's like a little bit stretched in places and a little bit tighter in places, but it's one of those things that you just have to judge. Like, is anyone really going to notice? So this is UV. This is just like the start of UV. And once again, we can texture paint, and you can still go on here and have fun with this. Like, you can make this a swirl. Whoa. So anyway, we'll probably revisit this again at some point. But this is a good place to start. Oh, okay. I'll just say one more thing. I want to look at this side here. So like sometimes, you know, this example worked pretty well because like cubes are relatively easy to UV map because there's not really a lot of sides. But as your models get more complex, your shapes can get like a little bit more, or your image textures can get a little bit more distorted because they're a little bit irregular. So like if I had UV unwrapped this and, whoops, let me grab these ones. Oh, it's sectioned that off, which is interesting. Anyway, and like this, like if this one was SY like this, like if this one was a much different scale than the others. So like if this shape is about the same size as this one, this face is about the same size as this one on the UV map, but in reality on the actual model they're much different sizes. You can see that it gets way off. This is when you'd have to get in here and really kind of tweak some of your SY, Y scaling of faces and things like that. to dial it in. Now, let me say one more thing. A for all. Sometimes you may need to try different ways to unwrap. So this is just the regular unwrap that Blender did. The other one you can try if you hit the U key or go into the UV menu is Smart UV Project. Projection unwraps the selected faces of mesh objects. And this kind of has, when you click that, it gives you like a little bit of tolerance. It limits the angles of things, island margin. So that'll like create space between islands. Area weight, I don't even know what area weight does. Weights projection vector by faces with larger areas. Yeah. Things you can play with. Okay. And so again, like now this is, it did something completely different than what it was before. One thing, just be aware that you can't, if you're painting directly onto an image, you can't erase it. So that's just something to be aware of. But obviously, like we can just open this wood texture again, open image, and it's fine. We could maybe we'll talk about layering image textures at a later date too, if you're really interested in texture painting. Anyway, okay, here we go. We did Smart UV Project, and this gave us a little bit of a different result, obviously. So here. So what Smart UV Project does is it doesn't actually take your seams into account. It attempts to pull things out with a relatively even scale. But anyway, so the moral of the story here is UV projecting is a thing that sometimes you have to do if you're using image textures and the texture is a little wonky and you have seams where you don't want them. Anywho, let's totally shift gears. And again, I'm sure this isn't the last you've heard about UV projecting. Let's talk about sculpting. Now, sculpting is, let's do a new general file. Don't save. Sure, I'll save UV. Sculpting is again, something that some people do and love and some people don't do ever. I'm actually going to go to the modeling workspace. A little more room. There's a program called ZBrush, ZBrush, that is like the bee's knees of sculpting. And if this is something that excites you and you're interested, so like we talk about ZBrush and we talk a little bit more about sculpting in the advanced 3D modeling class that's in the fall semester. So if this is cool, you should sign up for modeling for the fall. Anyway, ZBrush is really cool. Anyway, you can still do lots of cool sculpting here in Blender. Whew, took me a while to get to that point. Now, let's look at our cube here. I scaled it up a little bit, and actually let's just go to the sculpting workspace here. We have this sculpting tool. Let me delete the camera and the light again. We don't need this. So you can see that my mouse has this little blue circle around it, the sculpting tool. If I click on this cube and drag it around, nothing is happening. That's because sculpting is changing the geometry of your object. Now, in 3D, solid faces are impenetrable. Maybe that's not the best word. Are solid. They're just that. So you can't sculpt something that is like completely rigid. So what sculpting does is it actually moves edges and vertices. So let's add edges and vertices. You might say, well, Nolan, let's add a subdivision surface modifier. Sure, let's try it. I can tell you it's not going to work, but let's see it. Let's do an example. So we got to go back to object mode. We can add a subdivision surface modifier like this. This is the modifiers tab, the little blue wrench. There is a keyboard shortcut. We can do Control along, and the numbers on the top in my keyboard, I can do Control 1 to add 1 level of subdivision, or Control 2, Control 3 is 3 levels. You can see this number changes here as I do that. Control 1, 2, 3. Okay, so we've got lots of pixels to work with now. Let's do it. Let's go into edit mode, or sculpting mode. But oh, it's still not working. It's still, nothing's happening when I click. That's because the subdivision surface modifier is not non-destructive. So underneath all of this, it's still just those 6 sides. So there's a couple ways we could do it to actually create this geometry to work with. Because it's actually funny because you can see when I move my mouse around, it's only doing the sides. Like there's the top, there's this side, and there's this side. We can bake is the term that we use. We can bake this modifier. And the reason it's called baking is, like, imagine you're making a cake. You put in all the dry ingredients, you put in the eggs, the oil, the milk, you mix it together, and then when you bake it in the oven and it's done baking, you can't get the eggs out anymore. You can't get the milk and the oil. It's baked. It's now a cake, and there's no going back. So we can bake modifiers as well. So we have the subdivision surface modifier in here. There's this little down arrow next to the camera. We can hit that and do apply, which is going to bake this in. And so now it disappears because it's baked in. You can't take it out. And now we actually have, if I go into edit mode, we actually have all of these little faces and surfaces and edges and stuff in here. Let's go back to sculpt mode. Let me Control Z several times till my modifier comes back. Oh, there it is. Okay. The other option is just, you can do Control A to apply, and it's visual geometry to mesh. And that means, like, what you're seeing is it's actually going to make the mesh look like that. So it's rid of your modifier. Okay, and so the other thing you can do, again, is you can actually just, if you go into edit mode, A to select all, and you can even right click and just hit subdivide like this, and it'll actually just subdivide, add more faces. So the thing with sculpting is that you need more geometry. You need more faces and vertices to work with. Okay, let's actually start sculpting. Enough talk. I'm going back into sculpt mode here. So we were in edit mode, sculpt mode. Oh, you know what? And I also want to let's go back in object mode. I want to right click and shade smooth just so it looks a little nicer. You can still see just like a few little bumps around there, but that's fine. Okay, sculpt mode. We got this first tool selected, draw. Just click and drag. You can see that we're now sculpting. And so what it's doing is it's actually, with draw, this is draw. This is like you're adding clay on top. So if you click and hold and like move your mouse back and forth, every time your mouse moves over those vertexes and edges, it's pulling them out. And so like the more you click on it, the more it's going to pull it out like this. So you do the inverse of a tool. You just hold down the control key, and we're pushing it in. So it's a little bit confusing. Like if you were actually using clay to sculpt, you'd be adding more clay on top. But with this, we're just like faking it because we're just like pulling those vertexes out. Because actually, if I were to go inside this cube now, am I inside? Was I inside? You can see that maybe you can't see, but it's just actually like punching it out and sucking in the edges. It's like we're putting a dent in it. Not actually taking any clay out because it's hollow. There's nothing inside. And that's it. That's sculpting. There's so many tools. Like there's so many sculpting tools that like you just have to play with it. Like what's this one? Clay. I don't know. I've never used a lot of these. Smooth makes sense. Smooth. Okay, cool. Same thing as before. You have this little circle here, F, and drag your mouse wheel, makes it bigger. You can also just change your radius here. There's this dial here. Change your radius. Smooth. Oh, nice and smooth. Strength. Obviously, like the amount that it's, so like if strength is really low, it's only doing it a little bit every time your mouse goes over. If strength is really high, it's doing it a lot every time your mouse goes over. You can have fall off, smooth, fear, lots of different things. Cursor color, texture, whatever. Change the hardness, normal radius, things to play with. But yeah, there's some fun tools in here. What's this one? Snake hook. What does this one do? Okay, makes a snake hook like that, as advertised. So, this brings up a good point. So, remember what I said. We're only moving the existing edges and vertices. So as you get further and further away like this, there's less geometry to work with. Let me undo that a couple times. So like if let me also F make this smaller. Click. So let's say I want to hook out of here like this. No, bad idea. F, make it a little bigger like this. I'm pulling out like this. I've run out of pixels on the end, basically. That these got stretched so much that now it looks bad. So if I go into edit mode, you can see that like these faces got really stretched. And stretched polygons are not happy polygons. So the kind of idea is that you want to get the base of your mesh modeled using modeling tools, and then come in and add the details with sculpting if you so choose. Because if you're trying to like really add on and pull things out like this, you shouldn't have started with a sphere. You should have modeled this thing out first before you did that. So like what are some examples that you could actually do? So like obviously like faces, things that are natural, can use a little bit of sculpting. But like let's actually go back to our let's go back to modeling mode. Let's go back to our like wooden block example. Let's get a cube in here. Let's tab to Shift Control B. I want to bevel the edges a little bit, just like we had before. Okay. And now let's add a subdivision surface modifier. So I'm going to go tab. I'm going to do Control 4. And then I'm going to right click Shade Smooth. So this is like, this has a lot of geometry. And I'm just going to apply this as well, just so I want to see it. So look, so this is this is probably too much detail. Look at all of these vertexes in here. This is a lot of detail, probably more detail than you need. But like if you were really trying to be cool, and you wanted to like roughen up the edges of this a little bit, so it looks like this kid's block had seen some love, seen some action. We can take, what's this, crease maybe. Let me make this a little smaller. You can add just like some like little like dents, some little cracks in here, because it's like it's little details like this. Let's up the strength a little bit. That like give it some realism. Say like, oh yeah, like there's a little, I don't know, just like little dents like this, some cracks. Now, there are other ways to achieve this too that we'll talk about later in the semester. But like this is just a quick example of how you could do some sculpting. Your assignment 3 will involve some sculpting. Let's go over to, let me pull up D2L real quick. Let me pull up D2L. Okay. Let's make this a little bigger. Assignment 3. Sculpting spooky tree. I've filled out the rest of the semester, by the way. So like all of the assignments are in here. If you're the kind of person who wants to work, go ahead. But you definitely don't need to. In fact, I encourage you not to, just so you can follow along with the lectures as I talk about the assignments. Assignment 3 is spooky tree sculpting. The prompt is model a spooky tree using modeling tools and sculpting. Make sure you have enough geometry for effective sculpting. Submit your Blender file and a rendered image. Bonus objectives: add lighting, a tree bark texture, and branch and leaf particles. So next week, I'm going to talk about using particle effects. And we're going to like add branches and leaves to this tree that we're going to make. So everyone's going to be together. We're all making a spooky tree. So I'm excited to see the different cool ideas that people came up with. When I gave this assignment last year, I was actually pleasantly surprised at the variety of things people come up with. So this is worth 10 points. You have 3 points for modeling a tree, 3 points for sculpting, 2 points for rendering an image with this one, and 2 points for an on-time submission. So if you need a refresher on how to render an image, you can go back to one of the last couple of lectures, and you can go from there. So I am not going to kind of show you how to start this assignment. So I want you to like kind of start on your own here. Model a tree. So like, again, hold on. Let's go back to browser. Spooky tree. So yeah, I'm thinking simple. I'm thinking something, look at some reference images. I don't want anything like crazy detailed like this. Not at all. I'm thinking something simple, like this or like this, obviously in 3D. And it can be dead. We'll add some leaves and stuff and materials and other smaller branches, or you can as a bonus, because next week I'll talk about using particles. So spend some time on it. Think about how you would start this. What shape would you start with? What modeling tools would you use? How would you get it to, look spooky? What techniques would you use? So try to get started on your own. I'm not going to show you how to start. Next week, when I start the lecture, I'll show you how I would start it. So if you're feeling really stumped as you're trying to start this, you can hang on until next week. But I encourage you to just like begin, play around, experiment with it. So your assignment 3 is to make a spooky tree. So that's UV and that's sculpting. Again, not the last thing we'll hear about either of those things by any means. Sculpting is like it's something that I think I said this before. I think I said this earlier, but sculpting is something that you may never do again after this assignment. Or it may be something that you do on every single one of your assignments. So this is kind of like a bonus thing that can be very useful or just good to know about. Have a great week. And look for the next week. And we'll talk to you soon. Bye.